because it's encouraging us to put ourselves out there and be seen and share those experiences. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health, and that's really unfortunate. And, I feel like the movement is starting to shift in a positive direction, but these things take time.
Hey y'all, DFOS here. My goal with this Limitless Theory 360 podcast is to connect you with the very people that have positively impacted my life and will continue to impact thousands of others by providing education-based and actionable techniques to creating a limitless perspective on life.
So, my guest today is someone who is doing amazing work in the world of psychology and mental health awareness and overall health and lifestyle. Someone that has taken me under her wing over the last couple of months, and I can't be grateful enough. She is a mentor, a friend, and a business partner. And even though we are close to like 2,000 miles away, we seem to have amazing organic conversation. We both push each other a lot. And like I said, we only met 4 to 5 months ago. She is a graduate of URI with undergrad and recently just acquired her PhD from Walden University. Angela Bergen. What's up, Angela? How you doing?
Dylan. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm really excited to chat more. We have these conversations all the time anyway, so it only makes sense to share them with other people.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. These conversations are so organic and genuine, and they're random. Like, we call each other on random nights, like, oh my God, guess what happened today? And
yeah, I got 50 ideas. I got to get them out.
I usually say a bunch of stuff, and Angela is the one who actually coordinates the stuff and writes it down, thankfully, because my mind is just everywhere. But Angela is amazing, like I said, and she does so much, so much for me and for tons and tons of other people. So thank you for coming on and taking the time, because I know you're busy. I know we both are, and late on a Monday night, there's tons of other things we could do. But
we'll just have to do them after the call.
Yeah, exactly. But I just want to start, like I said beforehand, with giving your childhood background, or just kind of where you come from, what you're about, and how you got here, because you're going to be a guest on here plenty more times in the future. So I want everyone to be able to have some context, and I think you have an amazing story to share anyways. So.
Well, thank you. Well, I grew up in Rhode Island, down in Warren, Rhode Island. That's where I come from. And so we grew up by the ocean. It was beautiful. Definitely most of my time was spent playing sports. That's me. That was what I did with most of my free time. I enjoyed school. I've always loved to learn, definitely like a lifelong learner type of person. But sports on the athletic field was where you could find me for sure. Otherwise, I like to do craft projects and, get together with friends and family and just share positive experiences as much as I could.
Mm-hmm. I think family is definitely important to you. I definitely see that trend continuing in your life.
Yes.
It's awesome. And I also feel like growing up near the ocean really speaks to where you are, what you do now. There's something about Southern Rhode Island and anywhere in Rhode Island where you're near the ocean, where it's a certain vibe. Everybody who I know that grew up around the ocean in Rhode Island, which is kind of everybody because it's Rhode Island.
Yeah. The ocean is everywhere.
But I mean, the people that are within 20 minutes of the beach, like the real beach, there's just something about them. It's wild. It's good to see, and I found myself as I get older connecting with so many more of those people.
Yeah, it's funny. I liked the beach more at night than I did during the day.
That's amazing. I think a big part of that for me, because I'm someone who I'll go at any time, but a big part of what I like at night is just looking up at the stars, and you don't have to see the water, but you hear it and you feel it. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and the moon reflection too. And I remember going so many times at night just when I needed that bit of perspective, and I would go and just sit up on the rocks and look out at the water, and I would feel so small. And at the time, I think, based on some of the reasons, I would go to the ocean to kind of get that little therapeutic intervention. Feeling small was exactly what I needed, because when you feel like you have a lot of problems or you're got a lot of challenges that you're dealing with, and you go somewhere that makes you feel so small, your problems feel small, and then you start to feel bigger again. So it was kind of a cool process. It was always there for me when I needed it.
Yeah, it's funny how that nuance works.
Mm-hmm.
It's very, very funny. So like, walk me through a little bit of your transition away from sports and like into just so much health and wealth knowledge. Where did that start, and how did you kind of venture through that path?
Yeah, well, sports hasn't left me yet. I still play soccer. I still play women's rec indoor soccer. So that keeps me on the soccer field, which is great. And I have a wonderful group of women on my team. So I couldn't be more grateful for the just relationships that we have. That's more than half the reason we all show up every week. So, yeah, it's nice to still be on the field, still playing soccer. That was always my favorite. I'd love to play some more adult rec sports as time goes on. We've got two younger girls, two kiddos. So I'm sure someday I'll get back into some of the other sports I enjoyed. But yep, it's nice to still play soccer. And it's funny, I wasn't really at all a health and wellness person other than just loving sports. But as the years went on, it wasn't until, oh gosh, maybe 6-7 years ago now that I started to learn a little bit more about healthy eating and healthy living and that holistic balance that everybody talks about. And once I got a little educated on it, I said, whoa, my lifestyle is not as healthy as I thought that it was. We all have that innocent sort of like, we don't really know what we don't know until we come to that point where we're like, oh, oops. Yeah. So it was an interesting process to learn a bit more about that. And as I learned, we made changes in our life, my husband and I. And so it was a fun process. But I definitely would not have classified myself as a health nut before that point ever. I ate just kind of like anything I wanted to. And for me, I was one of those people who may have looked thin on the outside. I think because I was so active and had a pretty good metabolism, but I was definitely not healthy on the inside. So there's definitely been a really cool transition over the past 7 years that's taken place in my inside, as well as the outside. So that's good.
I think that's a huge point. We definitely don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
And I think I'm going to correct you, quote unquote. I don't want to correct you, but you said the process has been awesome. It's definitely something that continues to go on forever. There's and I think that's one thing that I've come to learn. One thing that did we talk about this like 2 nights ago? That we just try to push on individuals is the fact that we all started somewhere, and I certainly didn't know what I know now 6 months ago even.
Yeah.
Or, a year and a half ago, my diet completely different. Mm-hmm. So it's just a completely never-ending journey of just learning. And like you said, being a lifelong learner puts you in such a good position to maintain a positive mindset.
Yeah.
And understand that your problems are minuscule in the big realm of everything going on. So then what did you decide to go to undergrad for at Rose?
Well, funny story. I actually started undergrad at University of New Hampshire. I always wanted to go to New Hampshire, so that's where I landed. And for a year and a half there, I studied Earth Sciences and then majored in Oceanography, actually. So that was sort of different than where I ended up going with my life, of course. But I think that was because I felt like I was really strong at math and science, and knowing that there's a minority of women who tend to take those types of classes and excel in them, I just kept going on that journey thinking maybe I should just do this. I didn't really have a lot of clarity when I was entering college around what I wanted to do. So I really enjoyed the classes. It got to a point where they got to be a little bit more challenging. And then I thought to myself, do I want to be an oceanographer, and imagine what my lifestyle would look like, and decided that wasn't for me. And at the end of the day, asked myself that question, like, what do I really love to do? And the answer is just to help people. And so knowing that I couldn't necessarily do that on an ocean liner a few months out of the year, I decided to change majors and switched over to psychology, not really knowing what that field would have in store for me, but just knowing that I would be able to help people in that field. So I switched over and got my bachelor's from the University of Rhode Island, switched schools, and graduated with a bachelor's in psych.
So you switched after about a year and a half from UNH. You transferred to Rhody?
Yep.
Who would have thought? I didn't even know that. Which just points to the fact that we are so focused on moving forward every time we talk, that like we met each other less than 6 months ago, but we don't know, and we don't know.
No, we don't. It's like just laser focus on that. Yeah. How can we make an impact, right?
Yep, that's our number one goal, I think, every time we talk. And how can we change lives and help people? Which is, once again, like why I could do this all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So your development of psych, like what were some of the major things that hit you once you started learning about it? What were some of the major things that hit you in class? Like, whoa, that's something I definitely went through, or that's something that I've seen in my family or my friends. Mm-hmm. What were some of those key takeaways that you learned in your undergrad that pushed you to continue to do that and go further?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, I loved the content that I was learning, and definitely, there were lots of moments even in class or reading the textbooks that I was like, whoo, this makes a lot of sense, or this explains a lot, or wow, I can definitely relate to this. And you find yourself resonating with the content so much that you know that it's a good fit for you. So after having that experience with the content, I knew I was in the right place, and I didn't know where it was going to lead me, but I knew I needed to keep on going. Psychology is one of those fields that, you benefit more the more education you get on the subject, just because that's just the nature of it as far as like getting starting your career and getting on that path. You kind of need to continue to study it. Mm-hmm. So, and it was funny, I was working at the time when I was transitioning into, my coursework for my doctorate. I was transitioning and learning more about abnormal psychology and, what some mental illness looks like and what it feels like and what it sounds like. And at the time I was working at a psychiatric hospital and really getting to know pretty intimately what mental illness looks like and how it can affect a person and a family and a community. And through that experience at the time, I decided to major in clinical psychology, thinking this is what I want to focus on. This is what I want to do. But I will say that my experience in that field working it, I got a little bit disheartened, maybe is a good word to describe it, because the interventions didn't always seem to line up with my personal values and what I tended to think that humans needed to thrive. And it was like there was just a lot of focus on medication. And again, I'm not saying that medication is bad or that it's not helpful, but it seemed to be the first line of intervention. And I felt like these are human beings who are hurting. And yes, there are some things that, may be helped by medication, but I felt like humans first, like, connecting with humans first and foremost would be more beneficial, and learning about them. And everybody has strengths, so if we can shed a little bit more light on that and talk about things that are going well for the person. And, so anyway, I just had a little bit of a rub with the clinical psychology and decided maybe not. So I ended up switching jobs. I went into research for a little bit to study mood disorders, and that was an interesting transition too. And I rethought my clinical psych track, and then I had taken a course from a friend who was teaching some information about holistic lifestyle changing and all of that. And I was blown away by some of the science that she had presented me with, and looked a little bit more into health psychology, which is just that overlap between health and wellness, and how that impacts our psychology and vice versa. And I just, it was like a fit right away. And so that's the track I stayed on. So now I've got my doctorate in psychology with a health psychology concentration. So it was a fun journey, bouncing around a little bit there as I found my way, but that's evolution.
Exactly. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is just that ability to not get derailed. Just take the other track when the fork comes,
Right.
It doesn't really feel right. I'm going to go left, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Exactly. You just got to trust the process.
Yeah. Just to pull on the emergency brake, like that's not going to, help most often. You just got to keep moving forward, fall forward, figure out what you don't like most of the time. I think it was the other day I was listening to a podcast, and someone said that, I could be wrong on this, someone said that the Latin meaning for the word decision means to cut out, which when you think of incision or decision, right? Cut out. So it's not about choosing one, it's just about choosing what you don't want, the ones that you don't want to go and pursue.
Right.
And that's super funny that you ended up through all of that, just ending up with health psych, and basically what you were disheartened by was the fact that that wasn't a big part of general clinical psychology and what they were doing. And then you realized, well, I don't know the answers, but I know that doesn't seem right. And now,
I was missing something. Again, it's an important intervention tool. There's several tools that are very helpful, but something was missing. And I didn't want to get stuck in a place where you have to follow these rules,
You don't want to limit yourself.
Yeah, right.
So, I mean, that's a lot. That is a lot. And there's so many questions I want to ask you. But I think one of them is taking it back to the fact that there's a lot of different things going on in the world of psychology, and it interacts. I mean, we are where we are in human evolution because of psychology, because of our mind. So if there's one thing that overlaps with every other piece of health, it's that.
Yep, for sure.
And it's pretty remarkable that it seems to be so segmented, and there's like a barrier or a fence between all these different types of health. You have fitness, you have nutrition, you have pharmaceuticals, you have mental, you have mood disorders, like those, like even psychology and or something like anxiety and mood disorders, people don't see where those overlap. Well, I want to know why you think that is. Do you think that's a result of lack of education as young kids in school, or do you think it's just a culture where we're kind of driven to believe that as we get older?
I think it's been around, stemming from childhood. I really think that as a culture, we don't really encourage a whole lot of emotional honesty and vulnerability. I mean, we've talked about vulnerability an awful lot with all of Brene Brown's work and how important that is. And I think that her shift that she's really bringing about is perfect, and it's beautiful in as far as mental health, because it's encouraging us to put ourselves out there and be seen and share those experiences. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health, and that's really unfortunate. And I feel like the movement is starting to shift in a positive direction, but these things take time. But I do think that starting from early childhood, if we can encourage each other to have that safe space to be emotionally vulnerable and share what we're feeling, we get used to that and we learn I can safely share how I feel around other human beings, and it gets reciprocated back to me. And that's where we can create that trust and start a new cultural shift of being more comfortable saying, I'm not feeling very well and I'm feeling kind of low and sad. And, it just, the more you practice saying things like that and the more it's received in a positive way, the more likely you are to share that when that moment does arise later in life and you need some
Yeah,
help.
I think the biggest thing is, you said it's taken in a positive way. And a lot of, especially on the masculine side, the male side, we are just told, suck it up, or,
Mm-hmm.
why are you crying? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? They're like, toughen up, it's time to
Right.
become a man. It's all of these sayings, right? But words are so powerful, just dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and they suppress a lot of feelings that we're experiencing. And it's funny how this correlation just kind of hit me, but it's something that I often think about, is there's so much correlation between feeling an experience and having emotion, right? That experience being emotionally attached to you
Right.
and how you remember it. And I was reading it today in that book, Why We Hate, which I don't know I know we talked about it before,
Mm-hmm.
but
On
by
my list.
yeah, Rush W. Dozier Jr., he's the one who wrote it. And he talks about how if you experience an emotion alongside being in like a chronic stress point or just stress at all, your uh, your limbic system actually takes way more note of that and throws a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of hormones
Yep.
into the hippocampus so that your hippocampus can actually remember that scenario way more in depthly and for a longer period of time,
Right.
because it's basically a fight or flight response, and it's your body trying to say, evolutionarily, we want to survive, so I'm going to remember anything that threatens me way
Exactly.
more so I know not to do it next time.
Right.
And people lack that understanding, and it doesn't have to get that scientific, but just to know that if you can experience something and associate that with a positive thought,
Mm-hmm.
or even if it is negative, like we said, we have to just be okay with that and expressing it forward so that memory doesn't drag us down or get suppressed and become a false reality that we live in.
Right.
Um, and I think that's a big part of the anxiousness, the depression, and the biggest thing is kind of the mood disorders that are being seen now, like people having multiple personalities and things of that nature. So what did you kind of find when you were in that part of your journey, the mood disorders?
Yeah, a lot of times, and this kind of ties into what we were talking about before about ACEs, or what's called adverse childhood experiences. So a lot of times there's ACEs, there's this childhood trauma of some sort that seems to be having been experienced by a child growing up. And so when you're studying mood disorders and you have questionnaires that ask participants about their early childhood experiences, a lot of times you see examples of trauma, and then that correlates very much so with their ability to cope and manage a stable mood and be anxiety free. It's very challenging, and for those folks, it's definitely an extra challenge to be able to sort some of those things out. And yeah, it's really hard. So that is definitely like a common thread that shows up in the literature is childhood trauma.
Yeah, I think we all experience it to a degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we've talked about this before too, is just that ability to accept it. Um, and I love how your concentration is always on going after the younger generation, because most often we're not going to change the mind of people that are into their 40s or 50s or 60s or beyond. And even then, someone in their 30s, it's very hard to get them to open up about stuff like that. So my thought and question is kind of, where do you see interventions getting added to school systems that can actually make a huge dent in this issue that we're having? Like, what kind of interventions and what timeline?
Well, I think there's more of an effort in the school systems now for that proactive, treatment, for that assessment. A lot of eyes and ears are on kids, I think now, which is good in the schools to be able to identify what might be going on. So, there's school psychologists, which is wonderful. So they have not only a safe person that a child can talk to if something's going on, but also a trained set of eyes to be looking for those, symptoms that might arise in a child if they are experiencing some childhood trauma. And I think just having that first line of defense is helping to connect a child to services if that's what they need, so to get some mental health treatment early on, because as you said, it's definitely only going to get a bit more challenging as that child grows older and experiences much more stressful life events as time goes on.
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And one thing I wanted to just kind of play off of a little bit is that you mentioned that it's harder to work with the mind of someone in their 30s and 40s. And I think that can definitely be true. But I also think that although we can't always change someone's mind and you can't change the past, I think that what you can change is your story. Like Brené Brown talks about this with like the story that we tell ourselves. And it doesn't mean that as we're looking to heal ourselves that we have to suddenly lie about maybe some really hard things that happened when we were children. But I do think that it grants us a second chance at the perspective on what happened and how we look at it and what positives we can spot. And even out of the challenges that may have crippled us as children, what strengths have we gained as a result of those challenges? So it's a little bit of a different perspective, I think, when you're 30 and 40, even 20, and kind of looking back on what childhood was like for you.
Yeah, I'm definitely hitting that like mid-20s point where I'm like, holy crap, so many things come to your mind. And I love the fact that you brought up Brené Brown and the story we tell ourselves, because that was something that hit me so hard when I actually watched that video you sent me.
Yep. We watched it last night, by the way. It was awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that in the notes down below the video when it's uploaded, because that is something everyone needs to watch. But it's
like a few times a year, like all the time.
Yeah, multiple times a month if you can.
Yeah.
And it's something that I already kind of let slip away. But the story we tell ourselves it was so powerful. And it's funny that you catch yourself doing that so many times. Yeah. I talked about it with someone the other day. It was actually my best friend last night who's out in LA. We were talking about how there's this underlying egotistical conscious awareness of our identity and who we say we are. Yeah. But I think it was Jay Shetty, or it may have been somebody else, but Jay Shetty, he was someone who studied being a monk for years and years and years on end. He's only, I want to say, 28, very, very young. Awesome guy. He's making a huge impact on the world. And he talked about the fact that I'm not who you think I am. I'm not who I think I am. I am who I think you think I am. It is the craziest double entendre, but it makes so much sense, because I think you're thinking one thing, and it's what you think about me is what I think I am. It's not even a reflection of what's really going on in here.
Right. And so it is. And so we make it so, right? And it just solidifies and it becomes who we are.
The story we tell ourselves becomes
Yep.
our identity, and then our identity becomes so restrictive over the choices we make, the decisions we take, the people we hang around with, the haircuts we decide to get,
Mm-hmm.
the clothes we pick, and everything becomes this, I want to become this identity, or I am this identity.
Yeah.
And it was listening to it this morning too. Someone was saying, this was Tom Bilyeu on Impact Theory, saying if you want to say I'm dumb, lo and behold, by the afternoon you will be dumb. Like, if you want to tell yourself over and over again, it's going to happen regardless of what it is. And the same goes in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So back to the school and the education and changing kids' mindsets, because the way I see it, it's absolutely possible to change a mindset, and it's absolutely possible to just open someone's conscious awareness of what
Mm-hmm.
they tell themselves and give them the power and the education to go change their mindset themselves as they are older. But this nature versus nurture concept that we have, and this moldability of the brain that we have as young kids, we have so much ability to put good information and good habits into their lifestyles.
Right.
So the way I think about it as well is, if I have a kid who, picture healthy eating, take away the psychology aspect of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have a kid who's really, really struggling, and my goal obviously would, in like 5 to 10 years, my hope is that there is true nutrition classes taught in school, where it's not like health class, where it's not like, you have gym class 3/4 of the year and health
Mm-hmm.
class for 1/4. No,
Right.
it's like nutrition is a class that you take every quarter, every year. Why? Because you have to do it every day for the rest of your life.
Right.
It doesn't matter. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
You don't have to read To Kill a Mockingbird for the rest of your life. Like, that is not something you have to do. Yeah, you have to talk English, but there's a big difference there, and I don't know why people don't see that. But long story short, if these people are learning how to grow food or make their own food, and learning how to actually cook once you get to, say 13, 14, 15, 16 years old in school, those habits that they learn in school are going to get taken home, regardless of what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Because they spend 6 hours a day there doing those types of things. They take that stuff home, right? So if we can get to the masses where they're in a structured environment, they're all doing one thing, they're all at school from a certain hour a day. If we can change that, and they bring those habits home and they start teaching parents,
Mm-hmm.
parents become more aware. If the kid wants healthy food, the parent is not going to be inclined to buy them Cheez-Its. The parent's going to be inclined to make them happy, just like they do now with buying them Cheez-Its, because that's what the kid wants.
Right.
So if they come home and they say, no, Mom, I want, a cucumber and hummus for a snack, then the parent is going to go buy a cucumber and hummus and be like, what is up with this? Why? They're going to try it. They're going to like it. That is the way I think, most simplistically, and just with a lack of trying to go after so many people that are already set in their ways. They already have their identity. If we can change the kids and change their habits, they can bring those home and really change those people, the older generations' mindsets and ways of living. But now, from a psychology standpoint, what do you see us intervening within school, besides the, someone looking for stuff, but more so coping? How can we introduce coping mechanisms and the ability for people to just learn a healthier mindset and be able to see it themselves, right? Because it's all good and well to have an adult walking around the school that can look at a kid and say, hey, he might be going through something. But it's a whole different story when that kid is going through something and he says, Hmm, that sounds familiar. I
Yeah,
know where this is going. I know how it can go. I know how I can take a step in the opposite direction.
right. Yeah.
What kind of things do we intervene with?
So, I mean, my girls are in elementary school right now, and I've actually been quite impressed at the types of interventions that they have, even for all students, not even, for kiddos that are just struggling, but I mean, everyone, they're teaching them about three-part breathing, and they're teaching them about, counting down and how to take space and how to take effective space where you take a break from the situation and you do something that's positive and you can, reframe the situation. I mean, I remember the school psychologist giving us like a little lesson on what they teach the kids so that the parents were aware of what kind of conversations they're having around emotional intelligence and emotional development. And, he was showing us with the brain, and then you flip your lid, and then you write like all that limbic system stuff. And so it was very interesting that they found like a kid-friendly way to explain what happens when we lose our cool and what that looks like, and that there's like a neurobiological root cause of that, and it's okay, and it happens to all of us, and here's what we do about it. So I mean, the girls have had some yoga classes in their schooling already, and they're just finished kindergarten and first grade this past year. So I mean, so far I'm seeing some really exciting things at our school, and it makes me really happy. There's a lot of social emotional learning that's taking place there. They seem to put a lot of effort into the culture and the community within the classroom, and that is first and foremost. And when they make decisions, they can talk as a team. When they have, privileges and also consequences, they talk about that as a team. So I mean, I'm really excited about these developments. I don't remember that stuff when we were growing up personally. So, I mean, that's pretty cool that things are going in a positive way. And I think the more research that takes place, the more knowledgeable our teachers are. And it's amazing how powerful that is. So, there's something called the negativity bias. So you were talking about how we kind of focus in on those negative thoughts and those negative experiences. And again, it's definitely a protective brain functionality that we have, which is good for safety, but it's not great when we're just trying to get through our day-to-day life where there's not really a lot of real threats for most people. So knowing that we have that negativity bias, the more educated our teachers are, if they're aware of that, then they're going to purposefully bring in more positive experiences, more positive comments to outnumber the number of, maybe corrective type comments that they need to give to the kiddos. So they're working with that research, which I think is amazing, and it's making a big difference. I think the learning environment is so much happier and safer that way. And as the research continues to come out around these interventions, we'll only get more and more of a positive classroom and positive experience. There's also a lot of the research that I had done as far as character strengths, which we've talked a bunch about. There's character strengths education and intervention that can take place in the schools too. So to teach kids about some of the character strengths that they have and that their friends have and that they can see around their school helps them to frame their learning experience in a positive way as well. So they can feel proud that they were a great team player that day because their teacher told them so, or a friend said thank you because they shared something, and they're kind of creating that positive culture. So anyway, I think it's going in a good direction, at least from what I can see. And I hope that this spreads to all of the schools and we can continue this trend, because as a parent and also someone who studies psychology, it's a wonderful movement. I'm really enjoying it on both sides of that coin.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize that, one, your children were getting exposed to that, which is awesome. It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing. I wouldn't have guessed that.
Yeah.
Two, I think it may have to do with the fact that you're in New Hampshire. I think the live free or die movement is a lot quicker than the rest of the country. So like you said, I hope it also spreads to the rest of
Yeah.
the school systems.
Me too. Me too.
I mean, do you see 10 years from now, right, when your girls are sophomores, juniors in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard to like think about and visualize, but do you see those things that they're getting taught becoming much more socially accepted? Where if I was in high school and I meditated and told somebody that while being a 3-sport athlete,
Yeah.
being the cool kid that, had a girlfriend or whatever, it's like, what are you talking about? What do you breathe? Like,
You
yeah,
said like this,
I'm
right?
meditating and
Yeah.
sitting there humming, right? Actually,
Right.
I remember people used to make fun of that, like humming. I was like, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see that being more socially accepted? Like 10 years down the road, your girls are in high school and like they set time aside, and not just them, because I know being in your household, like that's going to be something that they just cultivate and they grew up around so much of it that it's going to be a part of them. But classmates of theirs, people who play sports, or people who are supposed to be jocks, or people who are, the party girls of URI, which I'm sure was crazy when you were there. When your kids go to college or when your kids are in high school, do you see those types of people sitting down meditating, or just being more conscious of the words they use around each other?
I mean, I imagine if they're exposed to it even from early childhood, that some of that has to carry over. Even if they don't continue to practice those things, I think the acceptance factor would automatically be a little bit better than when we were in school.
Mm-hmm.
But I also really think that your vibe attracts your tribe, and the types of friends that we each have at different points in life really just speaks to what we're into at that time. So I think that while I don't know if it'll be like, culturally acceptable in the masses, do I think there will be like a solid cohort of kids, when my girls are in high school, that meditate and,
Mm-hmm.
focus on self-care? Probably. It may not be a huge number, but I definitely think there will be a group for them to kind of fall into and not feel like I'm the only one.
Yeah. No, that's a great way to put it. The other thing I was thinking of is just the fact that the only thing I was exposed to, right, when I was younger was the fact that it was like, how do you learn, right? That was the closest thing we got to character strengths.
Yeah.
Was, are you a visual learner?
Right.
Or are you an experiential learner? And there was like, that was about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember those questionnaires.
Yeah. But like you said, some people are going to take these skills that they learn at a young age in elementary school and run with them. They're going to do them not just in school, but outside of school, and dive more into it. And with the internet, a 7-year-old or 8-year-old can easily go look up something on YouTube and find more information about yoga and meditation if they wanted to. They
Right.
pretty much come out of the womb knowing how to use an iPad now. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So, like you said, there's going to be groups that really run in love with it, fall in love with it, and run away with it. Sorry. And there's going to be some that don't really love to do it. But my question is, are they going to continue this education into the middle school and high school? Or does it then become too focused on, well, these kids need to get ready for a life? Is that stigma going to change? These kids are 18. They need to learn how to, do this and do that. Are those things going to get implemented, do you think, like with where they're starting? So if you have a 7-year-old now, in 10 years when they are 17, or when they get to middle school, then they'll start to implement those things in school. And when they get to high school, they'll start to implement those things at the high school. Or do you think they're just going to throw it all in there right now and see who takes it?
I don't know. I'm looking forward to finding out. I mean, I hope that the culture continues as they get into middle school and high school. And I think it's a case by case, depending on how much interest naturally the child shows. But from a school perspective, I hope that the opportunity is there and the education is there just the same as it is in the elementary school. So again, this might be district specific to where we live. I'm not sure, but I really hope that although coping skills are important when you're 7 and 8, they're even more important when you're 17. So hopefully this continues and they continue to level up those coping skills as the stressors start to level up too.
Which is a brilliant way to put it. I had a really good question and I can't remember what it was. So we talked about having, like my example of having real nutrition class, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, currently in the current school system, there's no one that's really able to teach a class like that, correct?
Yeah, other than a health educator, I would think.
Yeah. So do you think that opens up opportunities for someone like a psychologist to not only just teach in college, but for someone who just graduates with their psych degree to go back to high school and maybe teach high school psych that is just a lot more inclusive, right? It's not teaching the history of psych. It's teaching the coping mechanisms with psychology, and someone who is, well versed in stuff like yoga or meditation or character strengths and things of that nature. Do you think that is where it's going to kind of go, or do you think it's just going to be on the teachers of the current system to develop and learn more of those skills and start to share them with the kids?
I have a feeling it'll be a little bit of both. I mean, I think the teachers are diversifying just naturally because of so much research is coming out on these interventions, which is awesome. I also think, though, that they will start to bring in some more specialized individuals to focus on these things because the research is going to start to pour in with the outcomes. And once you see the outcomes, a school district starts to pay attention. So yeah, I really think it'll be both. I hope it'll be both eventually. I think it's great for the teachers to diversify because they're with the students a lot. You don't want to just save, emotional intelligence class for the 45-minute slot that it gets every day or every couple of days or, once a week even. But rather, these conversations are going in and day out with all teachers and all children and students. So I think that both would be like my favorite answer.
Yeah, no, I totally agree.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years, it's really funny how, because we're so overpopulated, and that's just a known fact, right? But when kids used to go to school, you think back 150, maybe 100, maybe even 70 years ago. And when kids went to school, it was an older, wiser person that was super inclusive in knowledge and had a very broad perspective on life. Someone that was just teaching more so wisdom than fact and knowledge that has been found through research.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't necessarily just, like you said, allot 45 minutes for this and 45 minutes for that.
Yeah.
It was inclusive. Someone asked a question and maybe a whole different topic came up because of the way that they asked the question, or, things of that nature. I think our education system has just become too much fact, and less because of the curriculums and everything like that. But I would love to see the same thing happen where teachers become someone who just knows a ton about everything and can just share life lessons and stories and things of that nature with people. And that's who I always found were my best teachers. People that weren't afraid to just talk about something completely different from what we were there for that day or what we were in that class for.
Right.
Because they just spoke to you on so many different levels about so many different things that you were actually open to hearing from them. What they had to offer, because you knew they were much more than a textbook with a monotone voice about history.
Right.
they had something to offer. They've traveled the world more than you do. You know this because they're experiencing this stuff, but they're sharing it with you. Where, like we talked about before, you have to be vulnerable. You have to be translucent. And when a teacher is like that drill sergeant type of person that just tells you what you're in that class to learn,
Mm-hmm.
you lose sight of the fact that they're a person, that they have experience, and that you're 16 and they're 42. So they have almost triple the amount of life experience that you do.
Yeah.
But you lose sight of that. And you don't respect them as much. You tend to shut it out, and you don't want to be there. And you think of homework as a drag and all of these different things,
Mm-hmm.
which puts us on almost like a job burnout, right? Like people get burnt out from their jobs and they start to lose sleep. They start to have anxiousness, depression, and start to, all of these things start to cultivate as a result. I think that's happening a lot in the school system because you're just getting burnt out day after day. Just more knowledge thrown at you, as opposed to applicable, actionable techniques that allow you to just learn more or go home and learn something that you want to.
Yeah. And I think there's people on the front line. I have a special friend who's out there on the front line, and she's changing the way that teachers teach. And she's, it's not just about that rote memorization. It's about, let's interact with this material. Let's get to know it. Let's touch it and feel it and talk about it and why it works and when it doesn't work and why, and have that conversation. So it is kind of exciting. And I also think too that the age of our teachers is a bit more irrelevant, only in a sense that life experience, sometimes, some people, even if they're really young, they can have a lot of wisdom. Yeah. But also too, Dylan, one of your top strengths is perspective. So it doesn't surprise me that that's one of the things you more highly value in a teacher, is somebody who can take you beyond that day-to-day content and kind of expand that vision and have that bigger conversation. But don't forget too that, like, I always like reference Maslow's triangle, if you remember that, in psychology, where like that need for self-actualization and those really like top high order thinking types of conversations and needs are really up high on that triangle. But our teachers, I think, at the end of the day, what they're providing is at that base level is that safety and that love and belonging and getting those kids' needs met and, nurturing them. And so, yes, I agree that our teachers, who are probably the most memorable ones, are the ones that took us to higher levels with our, just the dynamic between teacher and student and the types of conversations that would be allowed to come up and venture off into. But I really think that, at least from what I'm seeing in the schools, it's really exciting. It's just that those base level needs are being met day in and day out. So even if it's less content gets delivered because they're spending a little bit more time working through a group challenge, or, kind of making sure everybody's needs are met at a base level with safety and security and feeling that love and belonging, then that's where things seem to go. Do I know that continues into middle and high school? I don't know yet. Probably not as much, which is a bummer, but at least it's a good foundation for right now. And that's the elementary is the only experience I can share so far.
In due time, right?
Yeah, in due time.
Change takes time. So it goes back to the fact that regardless of what it is, psychology and mental health and coping with stress, or, cutting a couple things out of your diet and replacing them with a couple better things, or you just constantly learning. The one thing that has happened since I met you is that my perspective has grown even crazier, way larger.
Yep.
Partly because of where we met and what we were doing, right? That whole weekend, what we were there for.
Yep.
And it's something that I don't even know how to put into words. But, just going back to, changing not only psychology, not only the way teachers can bring more perspective and more wisdom to the classroom, not only changing the way that maybe we think about health in gym class, but understanding that overall there's a huge healthcare system that needs fine tuning. Where are you putting yourself now, or like what platforms are you putting yourself on now to continue to do that work yourself, and impact others in that way with all of the knowledge and wisdom that you've acquired?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a big question, and it's one that I'm actively working out right now with myself as I just graduated and trying to figure out these next steps. I've always had this interest, this, kind of duality, and I've always been interested in sort of this like biopsychology, like what is going on neurologically when we're feeling something, when we're having a hard time, when we're doing really well, like what is going on neurobiologically and how can we support that? But at the same time, I'm also super interested in some of the perspective stuff we were talking about. So like humanistic psychology and our personal development and growth and evolution as human beings as our years go on. And so trying to address both of those to get my needs met as a scholar and, as someone who wants to make an impact. So on one hand, you and I are working in the Nutrimetrics division, working to implement some wellness solutions into healthcare provider offices. So that gets that, psychobiological need met for me, because we know that there is a huge connection between our physical health and our mental health. And we cannot really work on our mental health without looking at the whole picture, right? We were talking about like the wheel of wellness, and that's something that we want to continue to educate people on, because it's not just any one thing. It's not just, that there's something wrong in the brain and we need to fix it with a medicine. There's also that person is a person. They're a whole person, and there is a whole number of things that need to be addressed or looked at, or, it's just, so there's so much going on, and we need to support so many different aspects of a person. And so one of those ways is that we can talk about diet, and we can talk about lifestyle, and we can talk about the building blocks of what make a healthy brain, what make a thriving brain. Because if we don't have those building blocks in the brain, it's much more difficult to sustain a positive mood, to have that, freedom from anxiety. So that's part of my motivation, is to work with healthcare professionals and mental health professionals who are out there in the field doing this great work, but they need some extra tools in their toolbox to address that biological piece of physical health and mental health. So you and I and a team of others are working to implement those wellness solutions to give those doctors yet another tool to help their patient outcomes increase, all the better. So that's like the one category there. And then on the other side of things, as far as personal development and evolution and things that we've talked a lot about before, I'm moving into some character strengths education and coaching, and working with the strengths that we have inside of us. And not just, the strengths are not like talents and things that we're good at, but rather just like human qualities that are valuable to us as human beings across nations and cultures. It's not specific to a certain area, so we're talking about character strengths like leadership and creativity and curiosity and perseverance. You think about all the research on grit. That's a huge topic right now. So, there's 24 research character strengths, and I'd like to just bring them more to life in our own lives as adults, being able to look out on our world and our experience and say, that we can see strengths. So changing that negativity bias into more of a positivity bias, where if we can notice 3 or 4 things that are positive or things we can be grateful for, and then, okay, so there's going to be that one negative thing that comes up. That's okay when you've got that different ratio. But when everything stinks all the time, that doesn't feel very good. So if we can train our brain to look for more of that positivity and give it names, you can recognize bravery in somebody else, and so when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change, right? Love that quote. And so that's what I want to do too, in that humanistic psychology way, that positive psychology way, is bring about more understanding of character strengths and what they are and how we can use them and how to spot them in other people. Ultimately, because we know that the more we use our character strengths, the better mental states we experience. So the more frequent positive emotions that we experience, and the more positive emotions that we experience, the more likely we are to engage in health promoting behaviors. This is what I researched in my dissertation.
Yeah.
And we know that the more we engage in health promoting behaviors, the better we are with our physical and mental health, the more positive outcomes that we have. So for me, it's okay, we want the positive physical and mental health outcomes. In order to do that, yes, we need to do more health promoting behaviors. And I think as a country, as a society, we know that diet and exercise is super important, but that doesn't stop us from falling off track. So ultimately, compliance is an issue, and that's where a lot of us fall short. So if we back that train up even one more step, we know that positive emotions versus negative emotions can kind of predict whether or not we take the effort to engage in those health promoting behaviors. If we're depressed, we're certainly not in a state of mind to care.
Yeah.
So our mental health and emotional health is more important, and that's going to predict that sequelae of health behaviors going forward. And so then my research took it back one more step to say, what is preceding these positive emotions? How can we make more of them? What is this variable that is there? What can we talk about and bring light to encourage more positive emotions and at the same time reduce stigma? So that variable that emerged was character strengths. If we can talk about our positive, human qualities between each other and highlight them more in our community, we're going to feel better mentally and emotionally. And then as a society and as a culture and a community, we can get healthier physically and mentally. So that's kind of my angle on that. So again, just, that we can address the physiological piece of physical health and mental health in this one area that you and I are both working. And then for me, it's that humanistic piece where that personal development comes into play. If we want better outcomes, we've got to feel better mentally and emotionally first. So that's kind of where I want to start.
Wow.
Yeah, I know.
No.
You want me to keep going? I can.
Yeah, I could sit here and listen all day because it's just so practical and it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is you say back it up one more step and back it up one more step.
Yeah.
And the thing that I see constantly, and the underlying reason I'm deciding to call this podcast LT360 is because everything comes full circle, right? And what allows you to be so kind and conscious enough to call out someone's character strengths. The fact that someone probably did that for you earlier in the day, and that caused you to have a happy emotion, a happy experience, and choose a better lunch, which provided you with more nutrients and more positive energy to then go 2 hours later and point out someone else's strength.
Mm-hmm.
And that will always be paid forward forever and always. You don't know the impact that you're having. And that has been the biggest thing for me with Nutrimetrics, and I'm sure with you, is we only have two hands. We can't help and touch everybody's life that we want to and impact it positively. But if every conversation we have is positive in the sense that we are either being vulnerable about a negative emotion or we are bringing positive emotion to the table, then that will unknowingly be passed on. But when we can do that with people that have access to multiple patients who are looking for answers, who are looking for help, then the opportunities are limitless. I don't know how else to put it. The amount of people that we can touch and influence positively becomes infinite.
Yes, I agree. I was doing some private health coaching myself and I enjoy it. But again, like you said, we only have two hands.
Mm-hmm.
So the impact was limited. And so by partnering with health professionals who have access, like you said, to hundreds of patients, going in and out of their offices all the time, that's a lot of impact. And it's an awful lot of, from a mental health perspective, I think of all these individuals out there in the community who are not seeking out mental health treatment for something that they probably could or maybe should. And that stigma is a real thing and it's really hard. So if we can come at this as let's support your body and your physiology, But oh, by the way, this is the building block of a healthy and happy brain. Just so
Yeah.
happens you start to feel better emotionally while you're also working on your physical health, so it's a win-win. And it's a real thing. You're talking about this upward spiral. So in the research, part of what I was looking at in the research, there's something called an upward spiral model of lifestyle change. That was Barbara Fredrickson's work. And the same is true for negatives. So, we can spiral up with our lifestyle. We can have those positive mental states and positive emotions spiraling up to positive health behaviors and positive outcomes. But the same is true in a negative way. The research supports that too. So we have to be careful and really protect the thoughts and emotions that we feel. And remember that, like we talked about, it's all about the story we tell ourselves. So while you can't just talk yourself out of mental illness, you can certainly make an impact by thinking about the story that you're telling yourself. What's on replay in your mind? And can you effectively change that a little bit to support some of that positive spiraling on an upswing rather than a downswing? So it's really important to be aware of what kind of track you have replaying in your mind.
Yeah, yeah. Are you running in the opposite direction, or are you running in the right direction? Which lane are you running?
Right.
All of these things play a big factor. But what was the doctor's name that you were talking about with the upward spiral?
Yeah, her name is Barbara Fredrickson. She's a positive psychology researcher. She's amazing. She's got a lot of great work out there.
Barbara Fredrickson. Have you heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza? You know him?
Yes, I have. Yep.
He is amazing. The way he talks about this stuff blows me out of the water. Just like when you were going off a couple minutes ago, and I was like, yeah, wow, oh my God, yeah, no, just keep going, keep going. When I listen to his videos, I find myself continuously just playing them over and over again.
Yeah.
And the number one thing that I correlate between both of you and anybody who talks psychology is, you're here, okay, let's go here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's take another step back and one more. And
Yeah.
you just zoom out as much as possible.
Right.
And that's how you get to the story I'm telling myself.
Yes.
Right? That's how you get to that perspective and that understanding. And then you start to become comfortable with that and say, okay, so I am telling myself a story, and there is reason behind it. And someone else that I'm having a conversation with is doing the same thing. So how can I be conscious of that and empathetic of that? Amazing stuff.
And two, you can ask yourself, what am I supposed to grow from this challenge? What was I meant to learn? If you keep bumping up into the same thing over and over again, there's something there that you're missing. There's always something we can learn and evolve from out of any kind of challenging situation. So while it can be like a buckle up, we got to get through this, on the other side of it, I think there's always that reflection that can happen that, and I think too, thinking back on childhood, it's one of those things where for a lot of people at the time, it's really hard and it can be rough. And, coming out of it though, you can look back with a bit more gratitude for what you had and a little bit more perspective, like you're saying, is you have a bit more wisdom and life experience to recognize that there's a bigger world out there, and your challenges in the scheme of things, may not be quite as big as you thought. And if you change that story that you tell yourself and kind of rewrite that narrative looking back even, it can be very therapeutic to just change that script. And, it's that neuroplasticity. We can rewire all the time. Our brain is rewiring. It depends on the input and it depends on what's on replay, right? But we effectively can change a good portion of what's going on up there.
Yeah, this conversation, whether it's us having it or the people that listen to it, that changes neuroplasticity. Every second of the day, we're changing and adding neuroplasticity into our brains and challenging our nervous system to stay up to date with what's going on internally and externally. And there's two things that I try to preach with limitless theory and fitness and nutrition and whatever it may be, is one, we are not training from a muscular standpoint. we're training from a neurological standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And from a nutrition perspective, I'm not training you to eat differently. I'm training you to think about food differently from a perspective standpoint.
Yep.
And when you bring that down, even that goes back to neuroscience, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were to wither everything away, we're just this huge map of nerves that's not even close to being understood yet.
Right.
The amount of connections we have up here is just as unknown as what's going on in the universe.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely unreal.
It is.
And we're just getting started. So that's why I'm super excited that we get to have these conversations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I am kind of bummed that you're not going to North Carolina.
I'll see.
What'd you say?
We'll see each other soon, I'm sure.
Yeah.
There'll be another event or training or something.
No doubt about it.
We'll be backpacking that weekend.
Yeah. Where are you going?
We'll be up in northern New Hampshire.
Oh, nice. That'll be awesome.
Yeah.
As a fam?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we have so much more we can talk about, and I can't wait to dive more into some of these topics. We already have a bunch before, and I mean, I wrote a bunch of other ones down now that we have conversation. So
every conversation leads to multiple other conversations.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
The ball keeps on rolling.
That's it.
So is there anything else that you want to say in the meantime?
I'm just looking forward to continuing these conversations because I think they're really eye-opening. And even as we talk tonight, I mean, learning new things and having new thoughts and ideas exchanged back and forth. And I think it just feeds into that growth mindset that you don't know what you don't know, and you won't know until you just jump into a conversation, and then you ultimately learn more than you planned on. So I would encourage listeners to just keep showing up and keep getting more of this information, because it's all about perspective, and you can't unlearn what you learned. So the more you can learn here, the more of an impact it will have on your life, like it or not, because you can't get rid of it,
No, I totally agree. And that's another reason I wanted this to be a platform for anybody who's, likes what I have to offer and is listening to anything that I have to say about my limitless theory lifestyle and all of that stuff. Is I didn't know any of this stuff without the people that I have conversations with, right?
Yeah, right. And it's very empowering information and knowledge. I think one of the things, even thinking about mental health, that once upon a time, I remember thinking like, this just happens to people. And sometimes it does. There's certainly genetic and, again, some neurobiology that takes place that makes it much more likely for someone to struggle with mental illness. And, but there's also at the same time an awful lot of power that we have over the state of our mind and our mental health that I didn't realize that power was there before. And that's part of the education that I've learned that's been so empowering, even for myself, having a history of some depression and anxiety that was quite prevalent in my life at certain times, to have the power now to say, wow, when my lifestyle is supporting that upward spiral we're talking about, man, those are non-issues.
Yes.
So it's really interesting that the more you learn and the more you try and branch out, the more empowering this can be, because you really, I think we tend as a society to think things just happen to us and that we don't have control over that. And it's a big myth. And I love to share that knowledge with folks as to how much power we actually have over our physical health and our mental health. And if only we can just try some new things and get back to basics and back to, like I said, building blocks of a healthy brain and a healthy body. If we start there, then we've got a lot of improvement that can take place naturally. And it's not so much that this thing happened to me, it's that we learn to work with it and we change that script.
Yeah, it happened for us for some reason.
Yeah.
And most often there is a definite answer behind whatever you may be dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes down to the environment, right? And I'm reading Rebuild by Dr. Zimbrowski, and he's talking about it doesn't have to be, your diagnosis doesn't have to be your your final story. It doesn't have
Right.
to be your identity. And he just goes into talking about how, yes, genetics play a role, but we only sequenced the human genome about 20 years ago.
Right.
And we're finding out that epigenetics is really what's causing so much of this, and just the ability to turn on or turn off genes based on the environmental stimuli that are going on around it. And I also read today in Why We Hate that 5 to 12% of males will experience some sort of depression throughout their lives, and 10 to 20% of females will experience depressive symptoms and times throughout their life, at least once, right? So it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And if you cultivate these habits and these positive affirmations and positive attitudes and perspectives, then you're going to be more able to cope with it, because you can't control everything, but you can control how you react to everything. And
Yeah.
that's the only power we have.
Yeah. And those numbers are way underreported.
No, 100%. Well, that was also in the like 98, 99.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, today the numbers are so much higher. And, we talk about Brene Brown and vulnerability and talking about human emotion and just being real with it. I mean, I would argue 100% of us have experienced some, point in life where we felt depressed, or the symptoms of depression. I mean, I don't know anybody who hasn't gone through a really hard time at some point in life, so I would argue that number is closer to 100%. And even still, so it's a very normal human experience. Why do we need to label it? So you're talking about Dr. Zembrowski and the diagnosis and all of the hoopla around that. And with mental health, it's the same thing, if not even worse. And, yes, it's helpful to give something a title like depression. When I say depression, you know what that means and looks like. You kind of have an idea. So on one hand, diagnosing is important, but it doesn't mean that defines a person or who they are. It's just a temporary adjective to describe what they're feeling at that time.
That time, yeah.
So temporary. And, I just think talking about our story, right? If we attach ourselves to a diagnosis, man, people think they are that diagnosis, and it's not even close to true. They're so much more. They are limitless. They are everything. They are them. They are all of their strengths, all in one tiny body, like all of this possibility. And yet we limit ourselves so much with labels and diagnoses. And so in mental health, for me, that's another huge rub that I have that I would like to effectively change. And with the stigma, it's really hard. But I think if we can talk about character strengths and things like that, it's a little less stigmatizing. I think it's, a bit more accepted. So hopefully I can make that impact that I want without being too psychologist like. Yeah.
No, you're definitely already making that impact. And I think conversations like this, like I said, and like we talked about, is where it has to start. So there's thousands of people having these conversations, and there's millions of people not.
Yeah.
And when we can change those numbers and flip that switch, we'll know that we've accomplished something great, and we're on our way. And it's just a journey that has to, keep on giving. We got to bring fuel to the fire.
That's it. We just got to show up. We got to show up and do it and talk about it, right?
Absolutely. You have to.
Yep.
And that's the greatest part about it. Half of it is just taking action and just being there.
Yep.
Put yourself in an environment, and you soon become that environment. And that, like we talked about, it can be an upward spiral, it can be a downward spiral. But either way, this was an amazing conversation. This is going to be awesome to edit and put out there. I'm super excited for that. And I'm super excited for moving forward. I know we have a lot of stuff to continue to work on.
Yep.
For our up and coming wellness events and education-based just get-togethers where we're just trying to share information with people, and I'm super excited for it. Because when you can provide an experience and create an emotion, people are much more likely to make a change.
That should be your tagline. I like that.
I actually thought of it yesterday on the phone with my friend. Provide an experience and create an emotion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you said it yesterday. I wrote it down.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it's funny. It's all back to the same conversation about mental states, mental and emotional states. Like if you build somebody up a little bit in an event or a get together or something like that, and all of a sudden they're more likely to hear what you're saying. They're more likely to think outside the box and actually think, maybe I can do this. Maybe I can make that change. But if they're feeling down and and you're not providing a fun experience for them, it's going to be a little bit more challenging if they're feeling not great. So
Yeah,
it's good. It's a
absolutely.
good tagline. I like it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So before I ask my actual last question, where where can everybody go learn more about you, find you, and what you're up to? Where can they find some information on you online?
Yeah, you can head over to angelabergen.com. You can email me at angelabethbergen@gmail.com. And
Mhm.
if you have any questions, let me know. My site will have some information about what I do with health professionals and also what I do on a character strengths, just getting out there in the community and doing some of this wellness education. And then we'll have some wellness events posted up on there too. So where we are in the different communities, we do some work up here in New Hampshire, some in Rhode Island. So looking to just spread this word wherever we can. So yeah,
Mhm.
definitely check us out. Check me out online and see what I'm up to next.
All right, cool. I highly encourage everyone to go dive into that world.
Thank you.
Um, my last question is top 5 people, dead or alive, that you could have a 30-minute conversation with. What would that be?
Wow. You and your loaded questions, Dylan.
Yeah,
Man.
I like this one to kind of be the like holy crap at the end, and just see where people's mind goes immediately.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in my more recent, experiences in mind, Dr. Ryan Nemec is the education director at the VIA Institute on Character, and I've been in contact with him via email around some things with my dissertation. So I'd love to have a conversation with him. That's definitely at the top of my list because of how much overlap there was. I mean, his work has really pioneered the way for me to do what I did and studied. So he would definitely be number one.
Okay,
Yeah.
uno.
Uno. I need to go
Uno.
through it. Four more. Hmm.
Looking for 5. We got to
Oh,
get 5.
we got to get five. All right. Well, I would say talking to my chair again, my dissertation advisor, Dr. John Aston. I'd love to have another follow-up conversation with him just to talk about some new ideas and gain some perspective on them, given his experience. That would
Mm-hmm.
be good.
All right.
Uh, I'd love to talk to Abraham Maslow.
What?
Yeah, I think, with his research on, his triangle there, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I'd love to talk to him. And did you ever read any of his books? He has a book, gosh, it was from the 80s, and I started reading it a couple years ago, and I would get through a page and I would be like, I need a break. I can't even handle this. This is like, whoosh. It was really, really good information and solid. Man, his talk about self-actualization, if you're looking for a good hard read, I'll give you the name of the book. I don't remember it right now, but it's on my bookshelf, and it's definitely it's a good book, but man, you got to like digest that information. It's amazing.
Okay. I'll
Yeah.
definitely look into that.
Yeah. I mean, I'd love to have conversations with my family who's passed, just to kind of check in and say hi, and of course just reconnect and as if they were here now, just to see what's come of everything, and just have that perspective and say
Share.
hi. Right, we miss all those conversations when they're gone.
You don't realize
Mhm.
it until it's gone.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. um and let's see, one more person. I think that It's a tough one. I'm so filled with gratitude that I have so many people in my life who are so supportive and positive that, I feel like I have so many needs met, which is a wonderful feeling to have, and something to be so grateful for. I suppose another researcher I would love to talk to someday is Barbara Fredrickson and her work on positive psychology and that upward spiral model, just kind of like process some more of those thoughts and questions with her. I think that would be an amazing conversation that I would love to have someday. And would love to have it right now just for even more clarity on, how to effectively work through these next few stages of bringing this out to the community and what advice she would have on how to do that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good 5. I don't, it's awesome to see where people's minds go. That's why
Yeah.
I love ending with that, because it speaks to who you are and where you're going.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I think unfortunately it's time to wrap it up.
For this one.
For now, we're just getting started.
Yeah, this is exciting. It's cool to have this platform. So thanks for hosting so we can get these thoughts out and spread some inspiration to the community, even through these videos.
It's so simple, but it's going to have such an impact, and I have no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So thank you once again for everything. I'm sure I'll talk to you within the next 48 hours, probably.
Yeah, sounds good. It's a two-way street. It's awesome. We have so much, positive ideas that go back and forth. So thank you too for your perspective and, just the opportunity to expound upon these ideas is great.
Anytime. For everybody listening, everybody watching, say thank you and dive into Dr. Angela Bergen's world. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you. Go spot some strengths, everybody.
Yeah. All right, y'all. Have a good night. Peace.
Please, y'all, if you were able to take anything from today's podcast, please share it with your friends, family, and anybody looking to live that free and limitless lifestyle. Or you could even write a review or leave a comment down below for us. It'll be greatly appreciated. Also, the LT360 podcast is partnered with lots of awesome companies, and we do not partner lightly. These brands are all well approved from a moral, ethical, and product standpoint. So please feel free to do your research, but I do not think you'll be disappointed in what you find. Angela was kind enough to offer all of the listeners and watchers of today's podcast a 10% off discount code to her shop.com website. All the exclusive brands that you can find on there will be 10% off. You can go to shop.com/A as in Angela, M as in Marie, and Bergen, Bergen, AMBERGEN, shop.com/AMBERGEN, and use code 10OFFMA. That's 10, and then capitalize all of these following letters, OFFMA. 10OFFMA, all capital letters. And that right there will get you 10% off thousands of exclusive products that you can't find anywhere else but shop.com, including AutoWorks, Lumiere de Vie, Isotonics, Skintelligence, and Cellular Laboratories. So please check them out. And in the meantime, you'll be helping out our great friend, Dr. Angela Bergen. Which leads me right into the next. Go check out nutrimetrics.com/limitless theory, where you can take a free skincare analysis, weight loss profile questionnaire, and Nutri-Physical, and even learn more about things like Gene Snip and custom cocktails. You won't be disappointed. Go check it out. Tons of free resources. You'll definitely be able to find something that will be able to help you customize your health. And lastly, today's partner store is farmfoodsmarket.com. It's one of the partner stores with shop.com. It's also Dr. Angela Bergen's favorite partner store. She gets free shipping on all orders of more than 10 pounds, everything from seafood, chicken, pork, beef, and tons of other amazing products that you can get there. You can read up on all the farms that they sustainably grow their products from, and you can also find sales, and you can also expect to earn 3% IBV if you are a business owner and a partner of Market America and Shop.com. So make sure to check that out. And if you want to learn more and you're not a partner, just feel free to leave a comment below. Check out Nutrimetrics.com and throw something in there, or slide over to Dr. Angela Bergen's website and throw something at her, and we will all make sure to get back to you. So thank you for listening, and have a great day. Once again, this podcast is a reality for me, the guests, and yourself, the listener, because of these established partnerships. So please continue to support these awesome brands and people. Remember, we are, life is limitless. I'll talk to you next time. Peace.